two men, secret rendezvous in a hotel bar just off a motorway service station. No, this is not the beginning of an adult movie. No, it's better than that, everyone. Much more serious too. We're talking, of course, about the future of one of our key politicians that many of you are very passionate about. Let's cross live, shall we, to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, good evening to you. Now, I've just given everyone a little hint there of the story that you might be about to tell us. Please give us the details.
That's right. We know about Lee Anderson, don't we? Of course, he presents a show on GBNews on Fridays. He had his whip suspended. He was removed from being a Tory MP for the remarks he made about Sadiq Khan, claiming that he was being controlled by Islamists. And that was seen to be beyond the pale for number 10 Downing Street. He apologised for his clumsy language, Lee Anderson, but didn't say sorry, and that led to him losing in the whip on Saturday, so he's no longer a Tory MP. He's the independent MP for Ashfield. Now, on Sunday, we're revealing tonight on GB News, on Sunday lunchtime, he met for a meeting with Richard Tice. Now, he's the leader of Reform UK, this party which is causing the Tories such problems, but running about 11-12% in the polls, just at a hotel off the M1, the Holiday Inn Hotel, Michelle, Junction 28, South Derbyshire. You may know it. Well, they met for a cup of tea or a drink or something there for half an hour or so on Sunday lunchtime to have a chat about what we don't know. We've gone to Lee Anderson. He says he won't give a running commentary. I've been on a political journey. That was yesterday. He also says today, I'm not talking about my next steps. And my focus is on representing the people of Ashfield. But this place where I work, Westminster, is so febrile that the fact that a disaffected Tory MP, former Tory MP, has a meeting with the leader of Reform UK has set some hairs running in Westminster tonight. Are we about to see Lee Anderson, the man described by the BBC as the red wall made flesh, about to defect to Reform UK? And who might go with him? These are unanswered questions tonight, Michelle.
Well, let me just ask you a quick question before I bring my panel into this conversation. If he did defect to Reform, what would the impact of that be, do you think? Seismic or what?
Well, I mean, I think sort of everything is in balance, I suppose. I think it is seismic. I think that Lee Anderson was raised up by the party as the focus of its red wall support. I've been told that if he went, several might go with him. Several other Tory MPs might go to Reform UK. A Tory MP told me today it was 50-50 if he jumps across to the Tories. It hasn't been helped by James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, saying today that Lee Anderson should apologise for what he said. He's been very clear to us at GBNews he won't apologise. And what he wants, I think, is an exit ramp to get out of this situation he's in. He wants to probably stay with the Tory party if he can, but as things stand, he's being backed into a corner, and the result might mean that this man leaves and joins the Reform UK. Now what might happen then is anyone's guess. There could be a by-election in that seat where Reform UK might try and win it for Lee Anderson. Again, by-elections can be held any time up to 3 months before a general election. So it's all in play here, and it just shows how for the fifth day running, we're not talking about the Conservative government's agenda, but about things, noises off, as they're described, and that's not great for Rishi Sunak.
Blimey, there's never a dull moment, is there, Christopher Hope? Thank you for bringing us up to speed with that. How glamorous did that Holiday Inn look in those pictures? Looked great, didn't it? Look, there's so much I want to get into politically tonight. I want to get into the Paul Scully thing. I've got a clip of an interview with Suella Braverman that goes live tomorrow where she says interesting things. But for now, let me focus on the Lee Anderson development, that hotel rendezvous. What do you make to that? Are you worried as a Tory party or as a Tory peer? Do you think, oh gosh, is he going to go? Do you want to lose him? Where are you on it all?
Well, I don't want to lose anybody from the Conservative Party. I'd like more people to join the Conservative Party. I'd like more Conservative MPs. So, generally speaking, I'm pro-Conservative MPs and against people not being Conservative MPs. Lee Anderson is a character. I have to say my personal view is that his position, whether he's in the Conservative Party or Reform UK or joins the Labour Party, which he used to be a member of, or whatever he does, I don't think it'll have a huge impact outside his constituency, to be perfectly frank. So I think it's important to follow what he's doing, but the idea that he is a sort of totemic leadership figure and people will trail after him in a certain direction because it's Lee Anderson, I don't think that's wholly convincing. I think other things have to happen as well before you get that sort of exodus. But of course, it would make a difference in his seat because you'd have more candidates. If he was standing as an independent, you'd have more candidates, more vote splitting. It makes the result of the election in that constituency more unpredictable.
I just feel a little bit like the Tories seem to be the gift that keeps on giving to the Reform Party at the moment. I've got to say, I'm absolutely convinced that that is not intentional. Anyway, your thoughts on it all?
I think Lee Anderson is kind of positioning himself to be the byproduct of a post-Trumpian or soon to maybe again Trumpian era, whereas the image, the optics of the individual against the establishment, standing against it no matter what, that is very galvanizing. All he needs is a kind of machinery behind him, like social media, and he could become a huge problem to the Conservatives because all he's showing now is that I can stand 10 toes down in what I believe in, no matter who pushes me. And because the particular topic is the idea of Islamophobia, which is so polarizing, to have a figure who speaks to the working class experience in Britain, who's willing to go up against it and be in a position of power that he will put at risk for his opinion, that's very motivational to people who feel they don't have a voice.
Yeah, and I mean, he will say, hang on a second, it's not about Islamophobia. He would say he's not Islamophobic. He would say there's a difference between an Islamist extremist and your normal, average, law-abiding, decent, upstanding Muslim. So he would absolutely say he's not Islamophobic, and that's not what this is about.
Yes and no, because it's all kind of holistically involved. They all bleed into one another because whereas you can say you're talking about extremism, it speaks to a religion which is an entirety of a community because born out of that religion is where you have the extremists. So if you're not truly specific, because the way he phrased it was not specific enough. And if you articulate it in a way that leaves...
But he was specific. He said Islamist. That's quite specific.
The rest of it didn't really speak to who you're talking about because Islamists are Muslim people who have certain kinds of views. Muslim people are part of the community in which Islamists can be found. What you need is that's what I'm saying politics is so dicey. You have to be so clear about what you're saying, and the complete articulation of what he said was not specific enough where you could offend other people. What a lot of people in the Muslim community want is separate us from them. You can speak to extreme politics and extremism, but be sure to separate us from them because we are not with them. And if you have a position of power and the kind of power he has, his rhetoric needs to be more specific.
See, do you get this whole notion that there's this conflation of what Lee Anderson said and therefore he is somehow Islamophobic, because that has really kind of consumed a lot of the conversation, hasn't it, over the last hours, days, whatever, about is Lee Anderson Islamophobic? And of course, he was on Patrick Christie's show last night. He was pushing back against this notion. He was saying, what even is Islamophobia? He was basically saying, is it a form of essentially like de facto blasphemy? Are you saying that anyone that criticises the religion of Islam is therefore somehow an Islamophobic? So he was really quite clear in what he was saying. He was specifically talking about the extremists, but it has been conflated, hasn't it? Do you think I mean, I can't even believe I'm even about to say this sentence because I don't think he is Islamophobic. I think he's been very clear in what he said, but notwithstanding that, I'll ask you the question. Do you think he is?
Well, I mean, the politicians of all parties, sensible politicians, have maintained over the last few years, they've attempted to maintain a very clear distinction between the meaning of the word Muslim and the meaning of the word Islamist. And by Islamist, they mean people who adopt a particularly violent anti-Western agenda, something of that sort. And if you use, I think if you use that word, then it should be clear what you're talking about. If, as Judita says, it all bleeds into itself.
So but does it? Or are people deliberately bleeding it in?
But if it does, then it becomes impossible to have any public discussion about it.
It's impossible.
It does become impossible because everything, what you said, everything bleeds into itself. And I think there is a bit of a deliberate agenda on the part of some people to close down that sort of public discussion. So I think, unlike where I disagree with Judita, is I think these distinctions are absolutely crucial. And I'm perfectly happy to accept there might be further refinements in the distinctions. But we can't say it all bleeds into itself because that's to abolish the distinctions and it means you can never talk about it without being criticised.
I disagree with that.
People will talk about it.
You're speaking to a lived experience you haven't had. I part of my family is Muslim, and when I talk about the bleeding into each other, there is a way that people who don't have the information or don't have the access to understand the totality of the issue the way you do, think of everyone.
Lived experience of being
that
a Muslim.
sentence, after you said Islamist and then you described it, that was perfect. It was a soundbite. It was short. It was clear. It was succinct. Had Lee Anderson done that, it's clearer.
But why does he have to define a word that has been given that sort of
because
definition?
Because as a politician,
so
you're speaking to everyone and not just the people who understand you.
Yeah, but that is what that word actually means. That's how it's been used.
You're making an assumption that everyone gets it. Nobody owes you an understanding. The onus is on you to provide them with an understanding, to know what you are saying and the position you occupy.
Okay, so he would have been all right saying it if he'd added the words similar to the words I just used.
I believe so.
Right. Okay, so he assumed people understood the word.
He assumed
that was his mistake.
That was his
So there was no Islamophobia.
I say that I don't think he's Islamophobic. I think that he has a responsibility as a politician to execute his rhetoric with more discipline so he doesn't find himself in these situations.
Do you think that there is an agenda among some people to deliberately try and conflate the conversation about an Islamist with the conversation about Islamophobia? Because what they're deliberately trying to do is they know that if someone's got this valid concern that actually there are these extremists, the second you then start, not you, but one, the second that one then starts saying, oh, look at her, look at him, they are Islamophobic, everyone then goes, oh, I don't want to be called that thing, so I better shut up then. It's a way of silencing genuine criticism. Do you think that's fair or not?
I think that is fair up to a point, because it happens whether it's racism, sexism, anti-LGBTQ discourse, and this is the key I always say, the majority of these minority groups think the way most of society does. It is certain voices, like you said, there are certain people who often speak the loudest, are the most extreme, and then everyone gets a perception that they speak for the general community, and they don't. And so, yes, there are people that believe that it's kind of the exercise of confusion. If you muddy the waters, you don't give anyone a pointed perspective to address the actual problem. They definitely do that, but it is not the majority. So that's where the frustration comes from, where people say they're offended because you've taken the perspective of the few to define the many, which you shouldn't do.
What do you think what do you think is going on? Genuine confusion, or something a little bit more deliberate, perhaps an attempt to make people slightly more silent than they are currently being?